It's an absolute pleasure to have you on Tribe.
Thank you, Sean, and it's my pleasure as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, so where we'll start is some questions in general about your role at Moula, and then we'll move on into some questions about innovation and emerging technology at Moula. And we'll finish off the interview with more of a personal level, Paul. What drives you as an individual? How does that sound?
That sounds great, Sean. Let's get stuck into it.
Okay, great. Very exciting. All right, so a two-question opener, basically. What is your professional background, and what's your role at Moula? And tell us a bit about the company.
Sure. From a background perspective, I guess professionally, I'm a qualified actuary. When I think about it, that's where I started. That led me eventually to MLC and then subsequently NAB, and spent 19 years at that between the two of those, where I spent most of my time either in insurance or lending. So from a professional perspective, that gave me quite a lot of exposure from, I guess, starting in the financial sort of side of things, a lot of sort of analysis, reporting, that sort of stuff, and then moved into product management, and then eventually onto a very large transformation project, which gave me great insight into technology and how change is, I guess, thought through and delivered, and the impact that has on a very large, complex organisation, but also gave me a lot of insight into just how things like lending works. Like, you think about a loan, it's quite simple as a concept, but it actually gets quite complex when you try and make it work end to end. So yeah, I spent quite a number of years at NAB doing that. And then 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to sort of move away from NAB and the large corporates, and found my way into the opposite end of the spectrum, a small startup, if you like, in the fintech space called Moula. Yes, I've been there for 2 years. And Moula's there's probably a handful of fintechs in this space where what we try and do is provide a business lending solution to small to medium-sized businesses. And what I think differentiates us, or certainly to start with from banks, is that a lot of businesses, especially towards the smaller end, have challenges, I guess, borrowing from banks. Either they don't have an existing relationship with them, or they find the process either challenging or time consuming, or it just takes too long in terms of the opportunity they're trying to move on, or they're uncomfortable about providing security as part of the loan, which often banks require. So there's a number of, I guess, businesses out there that are in that space that are looking for an alternative, and Moula provides that alternative. And we also differentiate ourselves in terms of how we do that. So being a fintech, it's obviously very technology based in terms of our approach. So it's very much online, but we also utilize data in probably as much as anyone does, in terms of understanding the customer and understanding their needs, their situation, what they're looking to do, and whether it's the right answer to give them a loan and the like. So that's us in a nutshell, I guess.
And you're the Chief Data Officer there. Is that right?
So my role there is Chief Data Officer. So the way I look at it, we've got a small team in the data team that sort of works in this space. But the way I look at it, there's probably two parts to it. There's your more traditional reporting analytics side of things. So you think of data warehouses, you think of analytics and reporting that come out of that, which is very important in terms of helping support business decisions ultimately, and strategies and the like. But also equally important and equally, I guess, significant in terms of our work and focus is around driving automation through the use of data, and machine learning and AI is the terms people use that sort of is an application of that, but it doesn't
Yes.
just have to be machine learning and AI, but certainly that utilizing data to drive an automated approach to the process, I guess. So the customer process that we're
Yes.
dealing with, or other internal processes.
Yes, and we'll get into emerging technology and innovation in a bit, Paul.
Yep.
Just a following question. You've been in retail bank and now you're in the forefront of business banking. Can you just highlight for us, what are the key differences between retail bank and business banking?
Yeah, look, I think it's interesting. There's a lot of differences in some ways, but ultimately it's still trying to solve the same problem with lending, right?
Yes.
Many people might think of business lending as being more complex because a business is generally a more complex entity. It has more complex financials in terms of what's going on, as opposed to an individual, which has income coming in, personal expenses going out, and the like. But what I've found is the opportunity in business lending is I guess bigger in some ways, in that you can actually, I think, automate and use data more productively than in the retail side. And the example there is, in retail, it's become very regulated in terms of understanding an individual or a group of individuals, say, husband, wife, and their expenses, their obligations, and all that. And yes, data's playing a role in that, but it is highly complex when you actually try and determine an individual's financial position. Whereas with businesses,
Yes.
we've got quite good access to business data, be it bank data, accounting data, tax data, ASIC related data, and the like. So, and they're all sources of truth type data. So the quality of that data and the amount of, I guess, trust you can put in it, and the amount that you can utilize is in some ways almost not so much more straightforward, but you avoid some of the nuances and some of the the vagaries that individuals present. So in terms of answering that question, I've found that to be probably a real difference and a real sort of opportunity, and certainly something that you wouldn't have necessarily assumed straight up.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. So with business banking, it comes with a bit more certainty and structure in the data, and therefore giving businesses like Moula more opportunities, if you like, to take that base and platform forward, right?
Yeah.
Which we typically don't get in retail.
Yep.
Or harder to achieve. Yeah.
Yeah, that's certainly been my experience and observations. Within the space that I tend to look at.
Of course.
Yeah. So there's a lot of other differences we can go into, but that's one that comes to mind.
Brilliant. Quite curious, how is Moula dealing with COVID-19 at the moment?
Yeah. Look, I guess like most other places, it sort of it was came out from nowhere in some ways. Although we saw it coming to a degree, but not to the extent that it's impacted the world, I guess, and obviously Australia and the like. But we've probably attacked it on two fronts. One is on the customer side, where our end customers, the businesses that we lend to and the like, some of them have been impacted either directly, indirectly, and the like. So we've been sort of working closely with them, and this is where the importance of knowing and understanding our customers is really important, understanding their situation, and where again we've been using the data we have and continue to sort of have on our customers to really use that to help us work with them to find solutions to their own situations. Yeah, but it's actually panned out. Not as bad as one would have maybe expected at the start on that front. And then on the other side is employees. So again, we were quite, I guess, conscious to be as organised as we could be about where things were potentially heading with COVID, and the expectations and requirements around safety of our employees. So we started to do some almost business continuity planning stuff back in February, getting ourselves organised around remote working, even though we were doing a bit of that anyway, but having that universally supported across the whole business, to the point of having some sort of almost drills around it and the like. And when the call did come to stay home, we were ready for it. And pleasingly that the team have been, I guess, have taken to it pretty well, and they've been able to work productively, which is important for them as well as a business. And so far so good, I think.
How big is the team at Moula?
It's around 90 employees. So
all here in Melbourne.
Predominantly, there's a small number around the country that are in the business development type roles, but most of the teams within Melbourne.
Great. Now let's shift again. Let's get into key achievement and emerging technology in Moula. Really hoping that you can share with us, Paul, one specific example of how Moula has innovated. And you mentioned data is a big part of that. Can you share a little bit more? Yeah.
Look, without getting obviously into too much detail, the one key area of innovation, and we continue to innovate in this area. It's not just a one step and the job's done. It's a continuous area of innovation, is how we approach it, is around, again, utilising data for the purposes of assessing the risk of our potential borrowers. So again, understanding their situation, understanding how their business operates, the strengths of their business, and using that to support and in some cases drive the decision as to whether to lend or not, what to lend, and what structure. And the way we've gone about that is we have our own internal technology, but it's based in the cloud in Microsoft Azure. So we've been able to leverage capabilities within that platform that doesn't give you the answer around this, but it gives you the tools to come up with a solution, right? And I guess where to some extent the innovations occurred is we've been able to build our own solution using those capabilities in a way that we can continually refine and adapt as we continue to learn and understand more about our customers and the data and the structure of the data, the strengths and the weaknesses in the data, the insights that we draw out of the data, which is driven by our own internal experiences, obviously. And that's a continuous cycle. So we've developed it in a way that continuous improvement side of things is very well sort of supported. So it's not like a project in itself each time you want to adapt and change. It's part of the way of doing business effectively, right? So internally. And, again, sort of tying in with the agile approach to things, it was very much built out using agile processes. But, from my perspective, it's really benefited from that agile philosophy of not having to try and solve everything up front, but having a clear view of sort of roughly where you want to get to and what you're trying to solve for, but not necessarily having the solution perfectly bedded down day one and then continually being able to evolve that. So that's certainly been something we've been experiencing.
Would you say, well, here's the question. What is the most important thing do you think was behind the success of this great asset that you have that will only get better, right? What is it?
Well, I think one of the key ingredients has been, and then maybe some of this is, a benefit of being a smallish organisation, is that it was very much a business-led approach to solving the problem, but with technology being very much part of that thinking and team in terms of how can we use the technology capabilities that are available. But also, we didn't know all the answers straight up. So we were partly experimenting and partly, I guess, researching ways to do things. And what I mean by that, for example, is so not everything needs to be a technology developer building something. It can be a business person developing something with some of the tools that are now available that business people like myself and others can build stuff that fits in with the technology side and overall delivers the solution. And what that then means is the stuff that the business person is responsible, they can maintain and continue to optimize, and the stuff that the technology people are best equipped and best responsible for, they look after that. And the two are very much integrated, but it almost doesn't force you, but by implication, you've developed a solution that then becomes BAU in terms of how you manage that and continue to operate that, build that out, and the like. So without getting too into the technologies being used, it's been a reflection of how things were developed. It's now reflected into how things are continuously evolved. So that sort of working relationship, collaboration, and that continuous injection of the business side along with the technology side has been really impactful.
So I'm wondering, Paul, from where you came from with a much larger and more complex environment, has it been chalk and cheese?
Yes, is a short answer. It has. Look, and that's not saying that in a large organisation it's the wrong way to approach things. It's just it's just the nature of a very large organisation. You have to break things into departments and the like, and specializations occur, and you end up sort of not having that opportunity to organically evolve as an organisation around what you've developed as ultimately a customer solution, right? So so that again, in terms of my understanding of Agile and what it's all about, for me, it's a great case study of that type of philosophy.
Yes.
Without it being consciously there in the front of our mind saying, let's approach this in an Agile way. Agile just happens to be, how you do things, but you don't consciously do it because it's what Agile tells you to do. It's done. Yeah.
I mean, and this is what makes it so nice for someone like Moula in that, we see it all the time. Agility, it's not just a methodology and everybody does it differently. And when we say everybody does it differently, it's because Moula would approach it in their own way, right? The way that is continuously improving for your business and the assets and the people that you have. So, which is very hard to replicate in a different organization, right? No, that's really interesting, Paul. Thank you very much for that insight. Now that you've got this great asset and this use of data that is continuously improving, what does this mean to what you do in the future at Moula? Yeah,
so I think there's lots of other possibilities, but certainly in front of our mind is the extensibility of what we've already developed into other, I guess, use cases or other events, whether it's in the customer life cycle or our internal sort of life cycles, where when you boil it down, there's a lot of commonality around the problem that we're trying to solve with the solution that we've currently got in place. The whole sort of idea of having a services-based architecture, for example, this has some sort of synergies here where we've really built out a service which can be applied to other problems, and it becomes not a difficult task to start to extend that. And what you do find, and what we've been finding, because we've started to do this already, is that by applying it to other problems, you then start to also feed back into it ideas that has a benefit for your existing use cases.
Yes,
where
right.
you're almost adding to the capability based on other problems that you're solving for as well, which has been
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. That's isn't it? It forces you to give a different perspective to an
Mm.
existing problem. However,
Mm.
paying attention to something else for a little
Yep.
while. You know,
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
that whole and just sharing that throughout the organization. You know,
Mm.
I think that is that magic of continuous improvement that you've got happening there.
Yeah, you're right. So communication is really important too, in terms of whilst a lot of the detail work might happen within a smaller set of people, you want
Yes.
to make sure you don't get too siloed as well, in
Yes.
terms of making sure that other people who are, you know, who are influential in other parts of the business that may be able to leverage, what you're doing, or equally there's stuff going on there that you might want to be aware of and take into account with what you're doing. Yeah. So
That's
even in
awesome,
small
Paul.
organisations, it's easy to sort of let some of those slip through. So
Yeah. All right. Perfect. Now, if we can take it back to the last part of the interview, Paul, which is a little bit about yourself.
Mhm.
So, if you can share with us and the tribe community, what drives you as an individual?
Good question. I guess when I sort of I guess look at myself from a if I were to be someone else observing myself,
Yes.
I would probably see someone who does seem to enjoy, in a sad sort of way, a challenge or something that's like either it's a complex problem to solve. That's probably my actuary part coming out,
Yes.
or outside of that sort of work environment. I sort of punish myself on the bicycle quite a bit, and I sort of wonder why. But there's this sort of desire to, I don't know, either improve or to show that I'm not going backwards, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
for whatever reason, that sort of seems to that goal setting, and then trying to get there and make it not an easy challenge, a harder challenge, so that if you do get there, you get a lot of satisfaction out of it. I think that's sort of what tends to drive me. So, and yeah, obviously there's that, you can't do everything, and you're going to have some things that don't quite turn out well. But I think if you have enough wins, then that sort of the wins, outweigh the non-wins, I guess.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess that sort of tends to work for me as an individual.
How many kilometers are you clocking on the bike?
Well, not a lot at the moment because of coronavirus. I'm sort of constraining myself, but and then it's getting colder as well. So
Yeah.
yes, but I do need a new goal around my next milestone on the cycling side. So yeah.
Now, what would you share with your 18-year-old self, Paul, if you had the time again? With all your wisdom that you've gained, what would you share with your 18-year-old self?
It's a funny one because I'm probably someone that I don't normally regret things. So even if things don't play out very well for whatever reason, and look, there's obviously exceptions, but I usually sort of think there's a silver lining, there's a reason, there's a positive in all this. So looking back at my 18-year-old self, career-wise, I probably wouldn't want to change too much because I reckon things have played out pretty well, even though along the way you think, there was some dud jobs along the way or whatever or dud roles and some frustrating times. But that's been okay. I think, interestingly, I can think it's not until you get a bit older that you start to appreciate the health and body you might have had when you're younger, where you didn't feel sore every second day and all those sorts of things. So I think when I was 18 through to about 30, I was pretty lazy, I reckon. So on the physical side. So I think going back then, I think I wish I had been a little bit more sort of goal oriented around that side of things. So I think I sort of let it slip for a while. But too little, too late now, I think. Yeah.
Paul, you've always been a balanced individual, mate, and I've always enjoyed working with you in the past anyway. So I can
Thank you,
see
Sean.
where that answer is coming from, and I do miss those times, Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time, Paul.
Thank you, Sean. It's been really nice speaking with you and catching up over old times.
We would love to see how Moula evolves from this point on. We'll be watching with great interest, and hopefully you can drop by again to talk to the tribe community.
Great. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Paul.